You're not failing because you're unlucky. You're failing because you're playing a game whose rules everyone else already knows. And nobody, not your parents, not your teachers, not your friends, ever handed you the manual. That ends today. Think about the last time you wanted something badly. A promotion, a relationship, respect in a room full of people who looked right through you. What did you do? You asked nicely, you worked harder, you waited your turn. And what happened? Someone else. Someone louder, someone colder, someone who smiled to your face, walked right through the door you spent years building. That's not a coincidence. That's a system. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this 500 years ago. While diplomats wrote poems about virtue, he was watching. Watching dukes betray allies over dinner, watching popes trade salvation for gold, watching how the men who claimed to live by honor were the first ones to draw a knife when no one was looking. He wrote it all down in The Prince, a book so dangerous the Catholic Church banned it. A book that kings read in secret while publicly condemning it. Ask yourself this question: why would power be that threatened by a book, unless that book was right? Here is your uncomfortable truth. You have been operating on a set of social rules designed to keep you manageable, cooperative, predictable, safe for everyone else to exploit. That is not cynicism. That is the mechanics of power. And Machiavelli spent his entire life mapping it. Your weakness is not a personality flaw. It is a strategic error. Every time you gave your loyalty without leverage, that was a tactical mistake. Every time you revealed your goals before securing your position, you handed your opponent a weapon. Every time you waited for fairness, you were betting your future on a system that was never designed to be fair. This is a reorientation, not of your personality, but of your strategy. Here is exactly what you are going to learn. Information is the only real currency, and you've been giving yours away for free. Desire is a vulnerability. Learn to weaponize it in others before they weaponize it in you. Covert contracts are how weak people try to control strong ones, and you've been signing them your whole life. The fox and the lion. Why you need both, and why choosing only one gets you destroyed. Strategic silence, the move most people will never make because their ego won't let them. Shadow integration, the part of yourself you keep buried, is actually your most dangerous weapon. And finally, the complete move, how to get exactly what you want without a single person realizing what you did. Stay until the end, because that final sequence is the one most people will have to watch twice. In every conversation, every negotiation, every social interaction, information flows in one direction, and the person who controls that flow controls the outcome. You already know this intuitively. You felt it, the job interview where you told them your current salary, and suddenly the offer dropped. The relationship where you confessed feelings first and watched the other person's posture shift. From warm to calculated, almost instantly. That shift you felt. That was the moment you handed over your leverage. Machiavelli wrote that the lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps. The fox survives by knowing more than it reveals. When you disclose your wants, your fears, your timeline, you create an information asymmetry, and you are on the wrong side of it. The other person now holds a map of exactly where you are vulnerable. They know what you need. They know how badly you need it, and they will price that desperation accordingly. Stop performing transparency as a virtue. Before any negotiation, write down what you know about their wants. Then write down what they know about yours. Close every gap on your side before you walk into that room. When asked a probing question, answer with a question. What are you looking for in a candidate? Is not an invitation to confess. It's a probe. Respond with, before I answer that, can you tell me what's most important for this role right now? Force them to reveal their criteria before you reveal your pitch. And never state a deadline you don't have to. Urgency is pressure. Pressure is leverage. and you just handed both to them for free. The hyena does not announce its hunger. It waits, it watches, it moves only when the moment is right. Every person you have ever met wants something. Not a metaphor, not philosophy. Concrete, specific, sometimes embarrassing wants. They want validation. They want status. They want to feel chosen. They want to believe they are exceptional. This is not a weakness unique to weak people. Princes wanted it, generals wanted it, and CEOs want it, often more desperately than anyone else in the room, because they have spent longer pretending they don't. Machiavelli identified desire as the central lever of political power. He observed that men forget the death of their father more easily than the loss of their patrimony. In plain language, threaten what someone wants, and you have them. Give them what they want, and you own them. This cuts both ways. The dangerous question is not what others desire. The dangerous question is, what do you desire? And is it visible? Visible desire is a targeting system for predators. Think about the last person who had power over you, really had it, where you compromised your standards, swallowed your instincts, and accepted less than you deserved. Trace it back. At some point, you showed them how much you wanted their approval, their love, or their decision in your favor. You handed them the map. They followed it directly to your most vulnerable point and set up camp. Identify your 3 deepest current wants. Write them down. Now assume that anyone in your immediate environment already knows one of them, and conduct yourself accordingly. Learn to manufacture desire in others deliberately. Ask questions that make them articulate what they want. Then position yourself as the only logical path to that outcome. You are not manipulating them. You are becoming genuinely useful at a level they don't fully understand. Most importantly, practice strategic indifference, not performed indifference. That's obvious and pathetic, but real optionality. Optionality means you have alternatives. When you have alternatives, you never negotiate from desperation. Cultivate your alternatives before you need them. How many of your decisions last month were driven by their desire rather than your own strategy? Count to 3. Be honest. That number is the exact measure of how much ground you've surrendered. There is a psychological pattern that destroys more lives than betrayal, more careers than incompetence, and more relationships than cruelty. It has no formal name in most people's vocabulary, but you have lived it. A covert contract is an unspoken agreement you made with another person, without their knowledge or consent. You decided, if I do this, they will do that. If I work harder than anyone else, I'll get the promotion. If I'm always available, they'll respect my loyalty. If I never cause conflict, they'll appreciate how easy I am to be around. You held up your end. They never agreed to theirs. And when the outcome didn't come, you felt betrayed, used, invisible. They didn't betray you. They never signed the contract. You signed it for them. This is the psychological mechanism Machiavelli was dissecting when he wrote that men in general judge more by their eyes than by their hands, because it falls to the lot of few to come in contact with great men, but many have the opportunity to observe them. Appearance, not effort, drives perception. You built a covert contract based on effort, but the world was grading you on optics. Here is the brutal recalibration. Hard work that is not visible and narrated is invisible. Loyalty that is not positioned as value is taken for granted. Kindness that is not bounded by self-respect is perceived as weakness. Audit every current relationship for covert contracts. Where are you giving and expecting without agreement? Have the conversation. Make it explicit or end the dynamic. Ambiguity always benefits the person doing less. Before any significant action, ask, what do I actually expect in return? If the answer makes you uncomfortable to say out loud, that's your covert contract. Renegotiate before you resent. Learn to negotiate openly and surgically. I'm willing to do X. What I need in exchange is Y. Do we agree? This terrifies people who are used to exploiting implicit dynamics. That discomfort is a diagnostic, It tells you exactly who was benefiting from your silence. There are two ways to lose a fight. You can be too strong to be fooled and walk directly into the trap you never saw coming. Or you can be too clever to be threatened and watch as brute force simply walks over your strategy. Most people default to one mode and call it personality. The strategically dangerous person has no permanent mode. They are what the situation demands. Machiavelli was explicit. A prince must be a fox to know the traps and a lion to frighten the wolves. The fox maps the terrain, the lion commands it. You need both, deployed with precision, not instinct. Imagine you are in a meeting. Someone challenges your idea publicly, not because they have a better argument, but because they want to establish hierarchy. They are performing for the room. The fox response is not to engage directly. Acknowledge, reframe, let them feel they've scored a point. Then, later, in private, address the real issue, where they have no audience to perform for and no face to save. The lion response is deployed separately. When the room is watching and the challenge is to your core authority, not your idea, but your standing, respond with absolute clarity and zero deference. No aggression is needed, just the steady, unblinking certainty of a person who does not require external validation to know they are correct. The predator who only rages telegraphs every move. The one who only avoids eventually gets cornered. Before any high-stakes interaction, identify the moment. Is this a terrain mapping moment or a territory-claiming moment? Misidentifying the arena is the single most common strategic error. Practice switching modes in low-stakes environments and watch how your social energy shifts. Notice who responds to which version of you and why, and never let anyone see the seam between modes. Seamlessness is sophistication. If they can predict when you'll shift, they can exploit the gap. Most people are afraid of silence because silence is uncontrolled space, and uncontrolled space is where their insecurity lives. So they fill it with words, with justifications, with explanations nobody asked for, with confessions that function as surrender. Your ego wants to be understood, but strategy requires that you remain unreadable. Machiavelli noted that the prince who explains his decisions loses the authority those decisions were meant to project. Power does not justify itself. Power demonstrates itself and then remains quiet while lesser men debate why it worked. There is a concept in negotiation called the cognitive dissonance clause. You make your offer, you state your terms, and then you stop talking. The silence creates psychological pressure. The other person's brain, desperate to resolve the discomfort, begins constructing reasons to agree. You didn't persuade them. You simply gave their own psychology the space to persuade itself. Silence is not passive. Silence is a weapon, and it costs you nothing to deploy. After making any significant ask, stop. Do not qualify. Do not soften. Do not fill the void with nervous energy. Let it sit. Count to 10 internally if you have to. The first person who speaks after a proposal loses the negotiating position. Develop your resting neutral. The face that reveals nothing, not coldness, that reads as hostility, but neutrality, the expression of a person who has seen all the options and is still deciding. It will deeply unsettle people who are accustomed to reading your emotional state as a real-time feed. Speak less in group settings than you believe is necessary. Each sentence is information about your position, your confidence level, and your knowledge boundaries. Every unnecessary word is a voluntary intelligence briefing to your opponents. Now, we go somewhere most people won't. The part of yourself you've been managing, suppressing and apologizing for. Machiavelli called it virtù, not virtue in the moral sense, but raw, ungoverned force. Jung called it the shadow, and both agreed. The person who refuses to integrate it will eventually be destroyed by it. Every person alive has a shadow. It consists of the rejected parts of yourself that you pushed underground because someone, somewhere, told you they were unacceptable. Your aggression, your ambition, your anger, your contempt for mediocrity. Your refusal to pretend that everyone around you deserves the same things. You didn't kill those parts, you just locked them in a room. And now they're running your decisions from behind a wall, showing up as sabotage, sudden rage, or inexplicable self-destruction, right when you're on the edge of getting what you want. The person who has done the surgical work of shadow integration, who has looked directly at the darkest parts of their own nature and claimed them, is operating at a level most people will never reach, because they have stopped fighting themselves. Machiavelli embodied this. He did not pretend he was something other than what he was, a man of fierce intellect, political cunning, and zero tolerance for the comfortable fictions that sustain mediocrity. He looked at human nature with absolute clarity and refused to flinch. That refusal was his power. Identify the trait in other people that provokes your most intense reaction. That reaction is a diagnostic. Strong negative emotion toward a specific quality in someone else is almost always a signal that you carry that quality yourself, denied, repressed, and projected outward. Do not moralize about what you find. You are not doing therapy, you are doing reconnaissance. The goal is to understand your shadow, not to punish yourself for having find controlled outlets for these rejected traits. The aggression you've suppressed doesn't disappear. Deploy it in negotiation, in creative work, or in the relentless competitive drive to be better than you were yesterday. A channeled shadow is the engine of exceptional performance. When all these elements converge, the strategically sovereign person executes the complete move. In sequence, Step 1. They know what they want with surgical precision. Not a vague concept, not a feeling, a specific, measurable outcome. You cannot navigate toward a destination you haven't clearly defined. Step 2. They map the desires of everyone between them and that outcome. What does each person need to feel? Valued, respected, chosen, threatened enough to act? They know because they have been watching instead of performing. Step 3. They control their information flow from the first interaction. What they reveal, what they conceal, and what they allow others to assume correctly. Not deception, selective disclosure. The fox choosing which traps to acknowledge. Step 4. They hold no covert contracts. Every expectation is explicit or abandoned. They do not accumulate resentment because they do not operate on unspoken hope. Step 5. They are silent when silence accelerates, loud when loudness is the only language the room respects, and the seam between modes is completely invisible. Step 6. They bring their full nature to the field. Not their performed self, not their socially acceptable self, their actual, integrated, shadow-claimed self, disciplined by strategy, not suppressed by fear. This is what Machiavelli meant when he wrote that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Not cruelty, not aggression, but substance that creates gravity, the kind of presence that makes a room adjust when you enter it, not because you are performing power, but because you have stopped performing weakness. The person who executes all 6 principles simultaneously does not take what they want. They create the conditions in which what they want comes to them. Ask yourself this question right now. Honestly, how many of these 6 principles have you been violating consistently, without realizing it? That number is the exact gap between where you are and where you are capable of being. You came here, possibly, with the sense that something was wrong, but no language for what it was. Now you have the language, information asymmetry. You've been leaking. Stop desire as leverage. Yours has been visible. Shield it and map theirs. Covert contracts, you've been signing them alone. Terminate everyone. Fox and lion, you've been choosing one. Deploy both. Strategic silence, your ego has been spending it. Save it. Shadow integration, you've been managing your own nature. Claim it. Here is the consequence of inaction, and I want you to hear this clearly. The world does not wait for you to figure this out. The People who already operate on these principles, and they exist in your immediate environment right now, are not going to slow down because you're still playing by the rules you inherited. They are going to continue extracting exactly what they need from the people who remain readable, manageable, and afraid of their own shadow. That can stop being you today, not because you became something different, but because you stopped pretending to be something lesser. Machiavelli did not write The Prince as a manual for tyrants. He wrote it as a map for the person willing to see the terrain as it actually is, not as they were told it should be. You now have that map. If this forced you to look at something you've been avoiding, that discomfort is simply the feeling of a strategic gap closing. Subscribe, because what comes next goes deeper. We are just getting started. Before you leave, I want to know one thing. Which of these 6 principles hits the hardest for you right now? Drop Sovri Jane in the comments if this changed something in how you see yourself. Because sovereignty is not given, it is built, one principle at a time.